This is the Asia Trade. I'm Annabelle Drewlers in Sydney.
I'm Avril Hong in Singapore.
And I'm Paul Allen, live at Sydney's Bondi Beach, where 16 people were killed in Australia's worst terrorist attack. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has described it and condemned it as a targeted attack against the country's Jewish community.
And at Min Min Low in Hong Kong, where former media mogul Jimmy Lai is awaiting a pivotal verdict in a landmark national security trial in the city.
Well, in Sydney this morning, as Paul just said there, we have the city still grappling with what is the deadliest terrorist attack that we've seen in the country's history. We're also still grappling with the most fatal shooting that we've seen going back to the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. So that is certainly the main story that we're going to be focusing on throughout the hour today. But aside from that, we still have the market dynamics, of course, and we are seeing the ASX 200 coming on today to the downside 0.6%. But aside from the Australia story, I mean, the main one as well for traders is still that ongoing concerns around the AI bubble and valuations that continue to look reasonably stretched, maybe not on a historical basis, but still concerns about really the outlook for demand and also the implementation, the spending that we're seeing from businesses too. So that sort of sets the stage. We did see Wall Street ending on quite a sour note going into the weekend. But let's also take a look at what's happening in other markets as well, Avril, with those US futures coming online today.
Absolutely, Belle. You talk about that sour note. We saw Wall Street turn lower, and it was really dragged by tech and investors turning away from the AI trade. What are they turning towards? It's these value names, financial stocks. That seems to be turning out to be the trade for the month of December, at a time where the likes of Oracle, a company that's spending a lot on data center build out, is said to be delaying completion for some of those centers for OpenAI. We are also digesting some of the Fed speak, some officials talking about how rates still need to be restrictive, others highlighting the labor market weakness. We saw treasuries on the short end outperforming the long end. The dollar, it's worth noting, we are coming into today after 3 weeks of declines on the Bloomberg Dollar Index. Belle?
Well, let's get back to our top story, and that's 16 people are now confirmed dead after Sunday's terror attack at Bondi Beach in Sydney. Two gunmen, a father and son, opened fire on a crowd celebrating the first day of Hanukkah in a beach, or a park rather, next to the beach. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the shooting was a targeted attack on the Jewish community. Bloomberg's Paul Allen joins us now from Bondi Beach. And Paul, as you're there on the scene this morning and you assess what's going on, how exactly are we dealing with this, and where is the conversation also likely heading?
At the moment, the overwhelming sense is one of grief. The mood down here, very, very somber, and you can probably see behind me here, there is a floral tribute starting to build up. An Israeli flag has been draped around the flowers, an Australian flag visible in the background there as well. And you'd expect that that tribute's probably going to build up over the course of the day. Just a steady stream of people coming here to lay wreaths and pay their respects. Now, as to who was responsible for this, two people, a father and son, neither of whom are on any security watch list. The father, a 50-year-old, is deceased. He was a licensed firearms holder. He held licenses and legally owned 6 guns. Police say all 6 of those weapons are now accounted for. There are also 2 rudimentary IEDs, improvised explosive devices, found on the scene. They were active but later disarmed by police bomb disposal. Now, the other gunman, 24-year-old Naveed Akram, his identity became known after it was widely distributed on social media last night, so there was really no point in trying to keep that a secret anymore. He told his mother that he was headed down the coast. In reality, he was with his father at an Airbnb somewhere else in the city. That property now also the target of heavy police presence. Amid all of the carnage at that Hanukkah event, also notable acts of heroism, not the least of which from Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a 43-year-old fruit shop owner who, in extraordinary video, jumped one of the gunmen from behind and disarmed him. Ahmed Al-Ahmed was later shot in the arm and in the hand. He's now recovering in hospital. Like I said, an uneasy sense of calm here today. Police are calling for calm, saying that this is not a time to be seeking retribution.
Paul, this is an attack that has shocked Australia. We're also hearing from other world leaders, including the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, and he has drawn scrutiny or has said that Australia failed to protect Jews despite warnings. Have a listen to what he had to say.
It pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent and you must replace weakness with action.
Paul, what do you make of a criticism such as this from the Israeli leader?
Well, that precise criticism was put to the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, this morning in a press conference. Prime Minister Albanese brushed them off to a degree. He said, look, this is a moment for national unity. He didn't want to get into the politics of it, but he described anti-Semitism as a scourge and it should be eradicated forever. He was also asked in a follow-up question, did you ignore warnings from the community? Because the Jewish community has been very public in saying many of its members no longer feel safe in Australia, to which the Prime Minister responded, we will continue to stand with Jewish Australians and stamp out anti-Semitism in all its forms. Now, it's hard to imagine that line is going to hold water for terribly long. This is inevitably going to become politicised as we head into 2026. The right-wing One Nation Party has been surging in the polls here in Australia, and the former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg this morning weighed in on this as well. He himself is Jewish. He called this all too predictable, and that the leaders have been have been bystanders in allowing the flames of hate to burn. So this incident likely to dominate the political conversation.
Paul Allen there at Bondi Beach, and we're back with you later in the hour. But joining us is Josh Roose. He's Associate Professor of Politics at Deakin University. And Josh, thanks so much for your time this morning. As you just heard Paul outlining there has been this sort of undercurrent already coming that political leaders have essentially been ignoring anti-Semitism on the rise in Australia over the past few years. Is that a fair way of looking at it and a fair criticism that we're hearing as well?
It's certainly a fair criticism. Since October 7, there's been a permissive environment that has allowed anti-Semitism to flourish here in Australia. There's not been sufficient political will, particularly from the government, to crack down on that speech that is not only anti-Semitic, but often cloaked in the language of anti-Zionism and so on, and really that obfuscates what's at the heart, which is the hatred of the Jewish community and Jews. This has been an issue globally, but unfortunately it's played out in its most deadly form here in Australia since the October 7 attacks.
Can you explain then the steps leading up to this, and was this in any way predictable? Should there have been a greater police presence on the scene, do you think, than yesterday at that Hanukkah celebration?
The Jewish community have been speaking about this and warning about it for several years now. And to that unfortunate extent, it was predictable. We've seen in the immediate aftermath of the October 7 attacks, people are congregating in front of the Opera House saying, gas the Jews, F the Jews, and many other abhorrent statements that were really, whilst condemned, were never acted upon in terms of holding people to account for hate speech. There's been an enormous amount of online hatred directed towards the Jewish communities as well, who have become conflated particularly in the hard left and Islamist mindset with Israel and their hatred of Israel in the context of the Gaza conflict. So Australian Jewish communities have been effectively held to account and put up as the target of a lot of this hatred. Now, there's been, for example, the Anti-Semitism Envoy's report, which came out about 4 months ago, which was very specific about some of the actions that needed to occur, not only to address this deeper undercurrent, but also to ensure the security of Australia's Jewish communities. And it's quite amazing to me, as working in the space that I do, that on Bondi Beach, in a very open environment, that there was not sufficient security to at least protect, at least for a short amount of time, the community as they gathered on that beach.
Josh, when it comes to public safety, should the conversation also be about closing loopholes in these gun laws, as one of the suspects, or the gunman, was said to have not only been known to authorities, but also had a license?
Yeah, so in the Australian context, we have tens of thousands of people with gun licenses, and you can go and purchase a weapon once you've actually gone through that quite rigorous process. A lot of people use them for hunters. There's many tens of thousands of hunters here in Australia. It was pretty evident from the use of those rifles that they were being used cyclically, meaning that they were single-shot rifles. As soon as they exhausted that supply or that firearm, they'd move on to the next. Now, if those were semi-automatic weapons, which are banned in Australia, the consequences would have been significantly worse. And so to that extent, it's almost impossible to ensure that a licensed firearm owner isn't going to go out and carry out some form of attack. And it's about mitigating that risk. However, the fact that someone could accumulate 6 of those weapons is of concern, particularly in the context of apparently living in an urban area. And so I'm confident that that would be looked into.
You mentioned the link to the hard left or the far left movement in terms of, I guess, the rise of anti-Semitism. But in response to this, how does it also propel the far right? And what Paul was just mentioning there, for instance, the gaining support we're seeing for the One Nation Party in particular.
Yeah, it's an incredibly complex and challenging environment, particularly for Australia's Jewish communities, who are being squeezed, on the one hand, between neo-Nazis who are gaining political ground and traction here in Australia, albeit as a very small group, but also far-right populist politicians, who, interestingly though, have actually come out in support of the Jewish community in quite strong contradiction to the extreme right and the neo-Nazis. But on the other hand, you've got your Islamists and Salafi jihadists, particularly strong elements whilst a minority, strong elements in parts of Western Sydney and northern Melbourne, for example. And then you've also got, on top of that, left-wing extremist element who actually align quite neatly with some of these Salafi jihadist elements around their hatred of Israel, their blaming of Jewish communities, and a conspiratorial framing of Jewish power as they see it. And so to that extent, the political environment's incredibly hostile for Australia's Jewish communities. And so it requires really strong political leadership that has zero tolerance for anti-Semitism, not only in public discourse, but online. And that just hasn't been forthcoming. If anything, there's been a rejection of attempts to address that. And it's been framed as a overreaction, an attempt to control freedom of speech and so on by its opponents. Now, it's all unfortunately a matter of too little too late, but serious bipartisan action needs to occur to prevent this hatred from continuing to fester in online environments and in our political discourse.
This attack could prompt that very relook. Josh, thank you for your time today. Josh Roose is Associate Professor of Politics at Deakin University. We're also following developments from a mass shooting in the U.S. Police have detained a person of interest after the shooting at Brown University that left 2 dead and 9 injured. The school has sent students home and called off final exams, classes, and assignments for the semester. The shooting happened in a classroom on what was the second day of final exams at the Rhode Island University, which has about 11,000 students. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. It's shaping up to be a pivotal last few days of trading in 2025 as we see investors rotating out of tech and going old school in pursuit of growth. And we're seeing strategists also advising clients to buy less popular pockets of the markets. And this includes financials, industrials, energy-related stocks. You're seeing this rotation underway. Take a look at this chart And let's bring in Markets Executive Editor Paul Dobson. So, Paul, this rotation out of the AI trade, that seems to be the trade for December.
Yeah, there's definitely a vibe in the market that is the way to go. You know, people have been concerned about the lofty valuations for the AI stocks for some time. Over the past couple of trading sessions at the end of last week, we saw worries over Oracle again and then Broadcom as well. Oracle also talking about, you know, and I found this really interesting, finding it more difficult to hit their deadlines for the build-out of the data centers that they're planning. And I thought that was interesting. It talks to that restriction of labour and materials, which is also going to be a thing because it's such a big expansion programme. So people worried about all of that, looking to level off their portfolios a little bit into year-end, moving into some of the growth-related markets, particularly financial, seem to have been doing well as well because we got higher yields at the back end of the curve, and so that's supporting the banks. Yeah, it sort of was an interesting one on Friday because that still pulled down the index overall by quite a way because the Magnificent Seven also came under pressure. So whether there's enough momentum from the rest of the market to keep on pushing up on an index level will be something that we need to watch quite carefully, I think.
Financials also sort of benefiting in Japan. This week we're looking at the BOJ consensus is for a hike, but why are we in such a state when it comes to the yen still?
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because the yen, all things being equal, you'd think it would be strengthening because we've got on the US side, we've had the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates. Over in Japan, BOJ, every analyst expects them to hike this month now, so that's pretty much nailed on. And they're feeding into the market this idea that there's going to be further hikes to come into next year as well. They would like the yen probably to at least stabilise and start to appreciate, and yet plenty of people still see the rate gap between the US and Japan wide enough that it will put further pressure onto the yen into next year. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's quite a big week in general for central bank meetings. Not only do we have the BOJ, we've also got the ECB, which is likely to sound hawkish a little bit, maybe raise its growth forecast, and the BOE, on the other hand, likely to cut interest rates. So that sort of theme of central banks moving in different directions and at different speeds is going to be really interesting for rates traders, for currency traders going into the new year as well.
A bit of central bank divergence, I guess. Paul, always great to chat. Thank you so much. Asia Markets Executive Editor Paul Dobson for us. Belle?
Yeah, and you mentioned all of these central bank decisions we've got on tap this week, and most economists, for instance, that are surveyed by us at Bloomberg expect the BOJ, as Paul was saying there, to hike its interest rate on Friday. That would be for the first time since January. Other central banks, of course, across the region in focus. You've got Thailand looking to maybe cut rates as growth falters. Indonesia and Taiwan also expected to stand pat. Traders also for China, looking ahead to the latest activity data from that economy, it is expected to show softening consumption and investments, even as industrial output picks up on firmer export demand. And out of the US as well, we'll get the November CPI and jobs report, which could shape a 2026 outlook for borrowing costs. Let's get more with Fenner, Head of Business and Industry Economics, at Westpac, joining us in studio this morning. So thanks for coming in. But tell you what, it's quite a busy week, actually.
It is.
What's going to be the most important data set for you to be tracking?
Well, I think we've got to say China. You know, the activity, we know it's going to be soft. It's lost momentum from the beginning of the year. What's going to be very important is that, you know, going forward, what kind of policy that we actually see to try and support growth, even if they go for a 5%, but to get that, we will need more policy.
Yeah, I think you really see that in the fixed asset investment numbers in particular, that they've really showing that sign of deterioration, or at least not picking up. Where do we go then for 2026, and what's the outlook? Do you see any sort of significant changes around the inflation outlook, for instance?
I think inflation is going to remain sort of quite soft. If we think about sort of the pressures behind that domestic demand, consumption, that's unlikely to pick up significantly. But on the fixed asset investment side, I think things are going to look a little bit brighter next year, notably on manufacturing investment and infrastructure, and that's going to be that big sort of fiscal push that we're expecting to provide support.
Yeah, is that fiscal push going to be enough to sort of fix the consumer sentiment to stir things in the Chinese economy?
That's going to be the big question. I think at the moment the focus and the fiscal focus is very much on that supply side, probably less directly going to consumers. They're hoping that if they actually sort of boost the manufacturing investment, that will provide support for corporate earnings, investment and wages. That transmission looks a little bit sort of iffy, so we'll see actually how that sort of progresses. They may need to provide more support try and arrest this decline that we've been seeing in the property market.
Sian, what's also been interesting is the rally we've seen in the renminbi. Talk to us about how that is affecting maybe Chinese consumers being a bit more open to spending, and then at the same time, how does that affect the exports picture for the country?
Well, actually, if we think about the relative inflation for China versus its peers, the fact that's actually been supporting a real depreciation in effective terms. So for exporters, it's been very good because that means there's, it's continue to provide competition. It's very competitive for China. For consumers, it very much sort of depends on the domestic front, and that yes, it could see some imported price being higher, but I think overall, it's the domestic pressures, demand pull pressures there are just still very, very weak, even if we have seen that sort of uptick that we did see in November.
It's interesting in your notes I see, yes, we've got that BOJ decision and most economists that we've surveyed are expecting them to hike. You're still looking at the risks, though, that are tilted perhaps in favour of them standing pat again. Yeah,
I mean, our baseline is for them to cut, but it's the BOJ. We do know that they still want to get a lot of confidence about that sort of wage sustainability moving into inflation. I mean, positively, we did see the Rengo wage negotiations. It's another 5%. They're also looking for real wages to be up about 1%. So that's pointing in the right direction, but they may want to just wait a little bit more for some more data.
What about then the Tankan survey? How's that also going to factor into it?
I think it's another key information for them. How has corporate sentiment improved? We're probably going to see that actually uptick a little bit. We've seen some of that trade policy uncertainty unwind a little bit. We've obviously got the fiscal stimulus as well. A weak yen does help exporters' profitability as well, so we should see that improve. What we're probably going to be looking for, though, is actually how is the output prices actually going to be moving forward. So are we actually seeing the higher input prices? Will they actually be passing that on to consumers? So it'll be another piece of information for the BOJ's decision.
All right, we've got BOJ, we've got China. The other one we're going to be watching is US front as well, because we've got a couple of different data points that are out. Again, what are you expecting, and how does it also feed into the trajectory for the Fed moving into next year?
Yeah, so I think it's, I mean, this is sort of a tough lot of data that we're getting out in the sense that we know there's still a lot of distortions going on because we haven't had a full set. It's the first lot of data that we're getting out post the shutdown. To be honest, I don't think we're going to get a real clear picture until we sort of move into January. We get the next lot of data. So it could be quite, sort of a bit messy, if you like. We're probably seeing an increase in the non-farm payrolls with the unemployment rate about 4.4. For inflation, though, it's still looking at about sort of 3.1. So we're probably going to get a little bit of a lift on the goods front. That's a little bit on the tariffs. For services, it's also going to be sort of quite firm particularly outside of the shelter. So it's still that balancing act that the Fed needs to undertake, of sort of this sort of overall probably that ongoing softness in the labour market, confronted with the sort of upside risk still to inflation, broader risk to inflation.
Yeah, certainly that risk that we see a re-acceleration in next year as well. Sian, thanks very much for joining us this morning. That was Sian Fenner, their Head of Business and Industry Economics at Westpac, and we'll have much more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Taking a look at some of the movers in the session so far, we're seeing Coles and Woolworths under pressure today. They are actually facing tougher oversight on their grocery pricing and new regulations banning excessive pricing of consumer goods in the Food and Grocery Code. ASX as well to watch, because we've got Australia's corporate regulator imposing a Aussie dollar $150 million capital charge on the exchange. More ahead. This is Bloomberg.
What we saw yesterday was an act of pure evil, an act of anti-Semitism, an act of terrorism on our shores in an iconic Australian location, Bondi Beach, that is associated with joy, associated with families gathering, associated with celebrations, and it is forever tarnished by what has occurred last evening.
That was the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese reacting to the shooting at Bondi Beach yesterday that left 16 people dead. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Paul Allen, who's down at Bondi Beach for us this morning. And Paul, I think we can get to certainly the pressure that's going to be mounting on the Albanese government over its handling of hate speech in the country. But first, as you are there this morning for us, just tell us exactly the mood and what you're seeing as well on the scene.
Yeah, the mood is incredibly somber, as you'd expect. There's a few dozen people just sitting around here. Nobody's talking. There's been a steady stream of people arriving to drop off wreaths in front of the Bondi Pavilion. Behind me here, among them, was the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He came and lay a wreath earlier. We also had a couple of people come and lay an Israeli flag and an Australian flag now present as well. But the mood here, absolutely somber and in shock. I have never seen Bondi Beach so quiet at this time of year. It is normally absolutely packed, and it was last night, in fact. It was a very warm evening. A lot of people were down here to enjoy the beach. And then, of course, there was that first night of Hanukkah celebration by the local Jewish community that was the target of this attack.
Paul, as we saw there, Albanese laying a wreath and flowers at the site of the attack. Also worth pondering what sort of policy or political implications this might mean.
Yes, that's definitely coming, and he was asked questions about that at a press conference earlier today, particularly in the wake of remarks from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said he warned Anthony Albanese 4 months ago that a call for a Palestinian state was going to pour fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. Anthony Albanese did not respond to that today. He instead said that this is a moment for national unity, but certainly that political conversation is coming. It's inevitable. Among the dead, a 10-year-old girl, an 87-year-old rabbi, a father of 5. There's going to be fallout. It's just a matter of when it happens and what form it takes, but this is likely to dominate the political conversation heading into 2026.
Yeah, just to reflect on that more, Paul, for us. So we were just discussing at the top of the hour as well around hate speech being linked perhaps to the far left, but you've also got the conversation from the far right and the rise of One Nation, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a phenomenon that we've seen in recent months. The right-wing anti-immigration, very conservative party One Nation has been surging in the polls. The opposition Liberal leader, Susan Lee, is under a lot of pressure. It seems she will likely be replaced sometime in the coming year, possibly by a right-wing candidate. That's also a conversation for 2026. But we also heard from the former Treasurer, Scott Frydenberg. He was the Treasurer in the Liberal Scott Morrison government. He himself is, of course, Jewish. He was very strident in his remarks today, saying that this was all too predictable. And ever since the Palestine rally that we saw on the steps of the Opera House earlier this year, he says the Jewish community has been persecuted and leaders have been bystanders in allowing the flames of hate to burn. So perhaps a taste of what's coming from the Jewish community and the political pressure that's likely to be applied to the Albanese government.
Paul, thank you for your reporting. Paul Allen at Bondi Beach with the latest on this terror attack in Australia. Now, some other top global headlines we're following. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has signaled Kyiv could accept security guarantees from the US and Europe in place of its long-term goal of joining NATO. Zelensky met with a U.S. delegation led by Steve Witkoff in a 5-hour meeting in Berlin on Sunday. Ukraine has sought NATO membership for years to protect against future Russian aggression, but has altered its rhetoric as Washington presses for the war to end. Thailand says there are no plans for a ceasefire with Cambodia. That's according to Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul, who posted on Facebook late on Sunday. It comes as Thailand reported its first civilian death from a Cambodian rocket attack after days of intense fighting. The dispute between the two neighbors have killed dozens of people since it erupted last week. President Trump suggests the U.S. will do big damage to militants behind a deadly attack on American forces in Syria. 2 soldiers and an interpreter were killed over the weekend during counter-terrorism operations. Trump has blamed the assault on the Islamic State terror group.
I can tell you in Syria, there will be a lot of damage done to the people that did it. They got the person, the individual person, but there'll be big damage done.
Chile's arch-conservative Jose Antonio Kast has defeated leftist rival Janet Jara of the Communist Party in a presidential runoff as the Latin American nation joins a global shift towards hard-right leaders. Let's get the latest with Bloomberg's Chile bureau reporter Carolina Gonzalez in Santiago. So, Carolina, what are Kast's main pledges and how he's appealed to voters?
Yeah, well, Kast was recently elected just a couple hours ago here in Chile, and it was a sweeping defeat from the communist Janet Jara. And some of his key pledges are surrounding the investment community here in Chile. He wants to deregulate any red tape within company investments, and as well as spur the economy by increasing growth to 4%. We're currently stuck around 2%. And so this would be very important for markets here. He also really wants to increase security. Right now, the country's undergoing an increase in migrants, which most citizens have attributed a rise in crime towards them. And so they're trying to really hunker down the border. There's been several already measures put in place by Peru to prevent these migrants from leaving Chile and entering Peru. And so currently this will be a hot topic in the next couple of days as the president starts making bigger announcements. And once we get closer to March, when he starts and takes over office and starts implementing new laws and trying to advance in his pledges.
Yeah, as you said, a number of different pledges. So what are going to be the main obstacles to achieving those?
So in the first round of elections, Congress was also decided by the citizens, and we ended up with a split Congress. That means that Kast will have to negotiate through party lines in order to pass any of the legislation that he wants to pursue. And any of the changes, any of the promises that he's made, those changes require a majority in Congress. He also has vowed to cut public spending by $6 billion in the first 18 months, given that the country has undergone a ton of deficits in the past decade. But he needs both sides of party lines in order to pass any of these laws.
So far, Carolina, it seems like markets have taken this quite positively. To what extent are we going to see this continue? And of course, predicated on the idea that he has to deliver.
Well, markets have already rallied a lot this year. The peso has appreciated by almost 10%. The IPSA is up more than 50%. That's the benchmark stock index of this country. And so tomorrow, the market is supposed to expect a positive outcome out of this, but it shouldn't rally much more. We should see a little further appreciation from the peso, and the IPSA should rise closer to March when he takes into office, because at the end of the day, the market just wants to see that these promises actually take into effect. And that will obviously be decided by whether he is able to negotiate with Congress, and as well who he appoints to his key ministries, that being Finance Ministry as well as Interior and Security Ministry.
Carolina, thanks for your time this morning. That was our Bloomberg Chile bureau reporter Carolina Gonzalez there in Santiago for us. And let's shift now to Hong Kong, because the former media mogul Jimmy Lai faces a verdict later Monday in a landmark national security trial, a decision that's going to help define the limits of free speech in the city. Our China correspondent Min Min Lo joins us now from outside the court. So Min Min, yeah, this ruling is expected to be handed down at 10 a.m. local time, so just over 2 hours from now. Talk us through the significance of this case, and as well how it's really going to be a test for judicial independence in the city as well.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is being closely watched here, because where I am outside the courthouse, there were many members of the public who queued here overnight hoping to get one of the 500 or so tickets to enter the courthouse. They are wrapping around this courthouse building. There is heavy police presence, police vans here, constructing roadblocks in the area. Security is very tight, and it's being closely watched because Jimmy Lai is one of the first and one of the most high-profile cases that has been charged under the national security law, and it's seen as a test of judicial independence, because he's being the trial is being presented presided by 3 judges handpicked by Chief Executive John Lee, and Jimmy Lai was not allowed from hiring a lawyer of his choice. The British lawyer Timothy Owens was barred from representing him after Beijing intervened and gave the Chief Executive John Lee the power to bar foreign lawyers from such cases. And the Secretary of Justice also ordered this trial to be heard without a jury, citing the involvement of foreign forces. And so many international observers are watching as a sign of whether or not Beijing is allowing Hong Kong to uphold the same civil liberties that they had under the British rule in 1997 for at least 50 years.
Min, we know Jimmy Lai as the media mogul behind Apple Daily. Tell us more about him and tell us more. What can you tell us about the details of the trial?
Yes, Jimmy Lai is a household name in Hong Kong. He founded the now defunct newspaper Apple Daily, which was effectively forced to shut down after authorities raided the company's offices a couple of times, seized its computers, frozen its millions of dollars worth of assets. And I remember when the company said back then in June of 2020 that it just had money left for a few weeks more of operation. It published its final edition of the paper at 10 times the usual print run, 1 million copies that were published and sold within an hour. But this is a newspaper that is known for its tabloid-style coverage of politics and celebrities and for its pro-democracy stance, right? Often urging readers to participate in protests. And Jimmy Lai's foreign connections is also under scrutiny because he met with the then U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo as well at the height of the 2019 protests, and prosecutors are pointing to that as evidence of him having the intent to collude with foreign forces to ask for sanctions to be imposed on Hong Kong and Chinese officials, even though in his defense, Jimmy Lai has said that yes, he called for sanctions, but before the imposition of the national security law and not after. So that has been a point of focus in this case.
Yeah, just talk about that a little bit more, the scrutiny we've seen from Western governments on this, but also the current context of this, given that we're very close to the LegCo elections that took place with a low voter turnout, and as well the sort of social issues we're seeing as a result of the Hong Kong fire.
That's right. It's coming at a very delicate moment for Hong Kong, right? Because it just suffered from one of the most deadly fires that we have seen in decades, with 160 dead. And in the aftermath of that, not only are people grieving the collective loss, but the national security authorities also warned individuals against hijacking or using the fire for their own political purposes to incite chaos in this area. And as you said, we had the LegCo election that saw the second lowest turnout in Hong Kong's history. And over the weekend as well, Hong Kong's Democratic Party, a leading opposition voice in Hong Kong since 1994, had announced that it is going to dissolve the party. And it was a party that was pressuring Beijing aggressively for democratic reforms, calling for universal suffrage, for example. But it's one of the latest parties to disappear in the aftermath of this national security law imposition.
Min, thank you so much. Min Lo, our China correspondent, with the latest ahead of this ruling on the Jimmy Lai security case. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Let's take a look at how Japanese assets are faring ahead of the trading session. We are still seeing the Japanese yen hovering near the 156 handle against the greenback, which is pretty remarkable given how the dollar weakness has seeped through, and in a week where the BOJ is expected to hike. We did see a down day on Wall Street Friday, so Nikkei futures pointing to those declines, but might financial or value-related trades have a better shot this Monday? JGB futures pointing flat. Meantime, Tokyo Gas, Japan's biggest distributor of fuel, plans to invest in U.S. downstream assets to lift earnings and reinforce the last leg of its energy supply chain. Speaking to Bloomberg, President and CEO Shinichi Sasayama says the investment will go towards making and developing the company's shale gas assets profitable.
We're currently investing mainly in shale gas projects in East Texas. Our priority for the next midterm period is to ensure solid revenue from these existing investments. As for whether we'll further increase our asset holdings, we will assess that carefully based on conditions. While ensuring solid returns from our upstream operations, we also want to invest in mid and downstream businesses to build out our portfolio. We've already made investments in midstream, downstream areas such as marketing and trading, and we intend to raise its profitability. For downstream, we're also considering opportunities in things like LNG liquefaction plants, export terminals, and the energy services sector.
I know that you've been reviewing buying potentially from the LNG project in Alaska. Where are you at in that evaluation?
Alaska has the advantage of being geographically close to Japan, and LNG can be shipped without passing through geopolitical choke points, which is a major benefit. However, pricing and other terms are still unclear, so further examination will be necessary.
When can we expect an announcement?
We only just signed a letter of intent expressing our interest. The pricing and other terms will eventually be presented by the other party. Since the next step depends on the other party's timing, it's difficult for me to say at this point when that will be.
Tokyo Gas maintains that Russian imports of gas are important for the energy supply of Japan, and yet we continue to see international pressure to stop these purchases. Will you need to reassess?
We don't see any urgent need at this point to review our position in the short term. Sakhalin gas continues to contribute to Japan's stable supply, so any final decision will be made in consultation with the Japanese government.
What sort of conversations are you having with the government on future purchases of Russian gas? And also, perhaps, can you tell us a little bit more about your diversification strategy as well?
We're not fully aware of any details to the discussions taking place within the Japanese government, but we understand that the government recognizes Sakhalin gas as an important energy source that contributes to Japan's stable supply. We have long pursued three pillars of diversification strategy in procurement: diversifying countries and projects, diversifying contract types by combining long and short-term deals and using different indices, and diversifying supply routes. Traditionally, our flows have been centered on the Asia-Pacific region, but we're now also looking to the Atlantic side to broaden our supply channels.
That was the Tokyo Gas president and CEO speaking to Bloomberg's Shery there, and staying with Japan because Asahi is considering forming a new cybersecurity team with disruptions from a September ransomware attack expected to continue into next year. As part of its efforts, the beer maker is adopting a zero-trust approach and scrapping the use of VPNs. The cyber attack froze Asahi's core business systems in Japan, resulting in November's beer and alcohol sales plunging 20%.
We're actively working to reverse the disruption, but a full recovery will likely take shape from next February onward. From that point, we plan to shift from recovery to resurgence, what we internally call the reconstruction phase. We recognize that some customers experienced inconvenience and that trust may have been lost in certain areas. We're grateful for their patience and are committed not just to restoring our shipments to past levels, but to exceeding them. This is the focus of our current internal discussions.
And we have breaking data crossing the terminal out of Japan as well. The Tankan survey for the fourth quarter showing how among large manufacturers that sentiment still seems pretty buoyant. The actual number for the fourth quarter among large manufacturers coming at 15. This is higher than the prior reading, in line with estimates as well. And this, of course, is a period that captures the pro-stimulus stance of Takaichi, the weaker yen, and how easing U.S. trade policy uncertainty is also seeming to buoy sentiment, especially among exporters. All in, looks like enough to reinforce the case for the BOJ to pare stimulus further this Friday. And don't forget that ahead of the BOJ decision and announcement, we will have the national CPI numbers. We are looking pretty range-bound still on dollar-yen. And you can catch Japan Ahead every Monday at 8:40 a.m. if you're watching in Tokyo. Subscribers can also watch live on the terminal using the TV Go function. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
You're watching the Asia trade and shifting our attention now to what is going to be one of the biggest IPOs possibly of 2026. And this is, of course, SpaceX and the incredible scoop we had on Friday from our team in the US. But talking about the valuation for this business, because when we last saw it, it was around the $400 billion mark, but it's now doubled to $800 billion. So the company, I mean, we reported this, the company confirmed the news as well over the weekend, but essentially moving forward with that insider share sale that values it, as I said, $800 billion. So setting us up possibly for what could be the largest IPO of all time, Avril.
And setting up paper gains for the likes of Alphabet, which, as we know, has been a long-time investor in SpaceX since 2015, I believe. So investors could be watching Alphabet's next scorecard for signs of these unrealized paper gains. Of course, we have been also seeing Alphabet going from strength to strength this year because of its prominence in the AI game, Belle.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see because Alphabet was initially seen as a bit of a laggard in the AI space, but it's certainly shifted the perception around it. And we are, of course, continuing to watch the impact of AI, the broader bubble fears that continue to have a bearing on markets because we are setting up for a weaker day. You can see Nikkei futures there off 1.3%. The ASX 200 as well, 0.7% to the downside in the first hour of trading. More ahead. This is Bloomberg. This is the Asia trade. We're counting down to Asia's major market opens. And Avril, I think we've got really a slew of different rate decisions this week to watch in Asia. You've got US eco data, China eco data. You've got concerns around the AI bubble as well in tech. I mean, it's a very, very busy end to the year. The question is, can you see that Santa Claus rally actually forming at all?
And on top of that, we also have Chinese economic activity indicators for the month of November. So the extent in which the policy mix is going to feed into the AI trade at the time where it does look to be stumbling a little, Belle.
Yeah, really concerns around valuations, concerns around the CapEx spend as well, but also concerns around ROI has been really playing into the picture. We've got the market opens this morning. So aside from tech, or rather tech, I mean, the story in Japan is also very much coming down to that BOJ rate decision later this week. So the expectation from pretty much all of the economists we've surveyed is that we are going to see a hike. Adding to that as well is that we had the Tankan survey just coming out in the last few minutes. We actually saw the manufacturing mood improving. So again, it adds to that hike case. You're not seeing too much reaction in the Japanese yen so far, but equities are under pressure in the early going. And I think that's very much, again, coming back to that tech theme, given you had fears around Oracle and the build out of data centers for OpenAI to end the week. So that is the stage that we see there in Japan. As I said, that large manufacturers, Tenkan survey rising to 15, in line with estimates. But let's also take a look at Korea in the early moments of trade this morning, because again, a very, very tech-heavy index there. You can see that pretty sharp sell-off, actually. The Kospi down 2.7% in the early moments of trade this morning. I mean, it's really that macro theme that we're continuing to assess, how much spending we have on AI generally, the payback of that so far as well, how the technology is going to be used into the economy, and also the timeline of that. Is the spending we're seeing so far justified? It's the bigger question, and again, it's a question we're going to be taking Avril into 2026 as well.
Yeah, especially with the likes of Oracle among those are spending a lot for these data centers, as you alluded to. Investors want to see this payoff. So perhaps unsurprising that as we head into 2026, last Friday, we saw tech was the clear underperformer. That drag was from the NASDAQ. And you do wonder, though, the extent in which value financial-related stocks, they can pick things up a little going into the end of the year. And aside from that, of course, we did see treasuries that outperformance from the short end. The long end was still a bit of a lag. The dollar still coming under a fair bit of pressure. For today, we are looking at the continued climb on the short end, the US 2-year at the early goings at least. And of course, into next year, it's also going to be about this conversation related to who the next Fed chair is going to be. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting it's going to be one of two Kevins, either Kevin Walsh or Kevin Hassett. And we have heard from the former. He's talking about perhaps alluding to that sign of Fed action being independent from the U.S. president. Have a listen.
I think he has very strong and well-founded views about what we ought to do. But in the end, the job of the Fed is to be independent and to work with the group of people that are on the Board of Governors at the FOMC to drive a group consensus on where interest rates should be, and to do so, basically with the guidance of the Fed chair. But in the end, it's a committee that votes.
Let's bring in Kyle Rodda, senior market analyst at Capital.com. So, Kyle, the big thing, I guess, in the markets going to the end of the year is this rotation trade away from AI. What are you seeing in the policy mix in terms of whether it's the Fed or the fiscal side of things that are going to influence that?
Well, I think that if you look at the Fed last week and you look at what investors are basically banking on, there has been a huge coalescing around effectively this idea that 2026 will be the time that we do see AI payoffs, and that crucially we'll start to see not just the growth benefits coming through of that, but also the productivity gains. I think it was almost remarkable that we saw the Goldilocks mix in the Fed's summary of economic projections last week of, strong growth, steady unemployment, but still disinflation. And it was screaming in the subtext there that the Fed, like investors, is basically betting on huge productivity growth persisting in next year and even accelerating. So given that that's the case, we're all now effectively waiting for AI to deliver those broad-based benefits that start to drive our performance in those end users of artificial intelligence to produce those productivity gains, to produce stronger profits. You saw at the end of last week that investors were flirting with that idea, with that sort of rotation from tech to cyclicals. But it remains a very much unanswered question whether AI, if not will deliver it at all, at least we'll do it next year. And if it doesn't, that's the sort of scenario you start to see valuations compress and stocks start to struggle.
Is that a similar view, whether you're looking at U.S. AI trades and Asian ones? We're also seeing some of these big Asian names declining or really under pressure today.
Well, I think it's everywhere, yes, because, if you don't see the productivity gains, rates don't come down as much. We don't get non-inflationary growth like clearly the Fed is predicting, and I think markets are probably pricing in. And you start to hit capacity restraints and constraints and fears that effectively ROI isn't either sufficient or at least coming soon enough to justify taking on more risk. In that scenario, equities basically continue to be effectively a momentum trade with valuations where they are now. And this isn't much of a prediction. It's more of a way of sort of seeing things and positioning to react accordingly. If once more, you don't start to see effectively that sort of disinflationary process coming through because of productivity gains and the benefits of AI starting to not just pay off for, semis and then hyperscalers. We're talking right across the economy. Stocks everywhere look a little bit expensive, and really it's very difficult to find a geography or a market that wouldn't be impacted by that.
What then is your strategy going into 2026 if you're concerned about the outlook for stocks generally, given it's been a story very much dominated by the Mag 7?
Well, I mean, if you think strategy is obviously long term and about positioning for the long term, then equities here look a little bit precarious on a risk reward basis because valuations are very expensive. And more or less, you have to ask yourself, well, under what conditions will valuations continue to be this expensive? And I'm willing to buy in on a risk reward basis into stocks. The one is we continue to see extraordinary advancements in the technology itself and these LLMs making a big movement towards effectively AGI and the displacement of labour and huge returns on capital, which is a very big if. The more likely scenario is the one that we've just spoken about, that we start to see widespread adoptions and therefore significant productivity gains delivered by AI. And that's really, we're waiting for evidence for that. The other alternative is that basically now's not the time to buy into the market. You need to wait for valuations to drop once again to become much more attractive. That's the strategic view. However, if you look on a tactical basis, we're still close to record highs. It's very much a momentum trade with valuations up at these levels. And if we break out to new record highs, as a trader, you have to sort of respect that and continue to buy into it. I would say, though, if we're just talking pure strategy and taking tactics out of it, risk reward is very unattractive here on a historic basis. And we're more or less, rather than predicting, but just waiting to react to the signs that, that AI payoff is there and then worth buying into.
It's interesting because you've got that volatility in stocks then and possibility for more downward pressure, but you've also got volatility that's shaping up in FX and rates markets, just given you're also eyeing central bank divergence into 2026.
I think it could be a pretty exciting year, relatively speaking, for FX and rates markets for this reason. And, I live in a world where, volatility is valued and looked out for. And I think relative to the last couple of years where volatility has been relatively suppressed in these parts of the world or these parts of markets, because what has been effectively a coordinated and synchronized cutting cycle across the globe, we're now starting to see very significant divergences for a number of reasons between major markets. And this week's probably going to be a fantastic microcosm of that, where you've got the Bank of Japan probably hiking, the Bank of England probably cutting, and the ECB holding, but maybe delivering a hawkish message. The year ahead is very much going to be about this kind of desynchronized move in central bank policy, therefore volatility in FX, therefore volatility in rates. And that will very much inform as a secondary as well, where capital flows in equity markets to get the best return.
Kyle, thanks very much for joining us. That was Kyle Rodda there, Senior Market Analyst at Capital.com. And in the early moments of trade, as we've been saying, it's really that concern we're seeing around tech and AI bubble fears that are continuing to shape the direction for markets, because you're seeing quite a significant sell-off in names like SoftBank, Samsung, SK Hynix in the early part of trade today. So SK Hynix has been particularly affected, given that we got a warning from the Korea Exchange just in the last few days, talking about, or issuing rather, an investment alert on those shares because they had been gaining on this New York listing expectation. So something else that's building into the SK Hynix story. But overall, again, it is significant weakness that we see in that tech theme in particular. But let's stay with tech and talk about the White House AI czar. That's David Sachs, because he says China's rejecting NVIDIA's H200 AI chip in favour of domestically developed ones. The US earlier announced it will allow shipments of NVIDIA's H200 to China in a bid to challenge Chinese tech companies or champions like Huawei. But Sachs signalled to Bloomberg that he remains uncertain if the approach will work.
I just saw an article that said that China was rejecting the H200, so apparently they don't want them. And I think the reason for that is they want semiconductor independence. The same way that the United States wanted to be energy independent, they want to be semiconductor independent. So they're rejecting our chips, and that's part of the calculation that goes into the decision of what we authorize to be sold to China.
Meanwhile, China is said to be considering a package of incentives worth as much as $70 billion to bankroll and support its chip-making industry. Let's bring in our senior executive editor, John Liu, in Beijing for us. And John, the timing of this story from our team is really interesting, given that we're just a few days off that H200 approval. Questions over whether China would actually allow companies to buy them in the mainland market as well.
I think it makes a lot of sense because just as David Sachs was talking about, there is this motivation within the Chinese government to become self-sufficient in chips because as Beijing has learned over the last 8-10 years, any dependency on the United States could and probably will be weaponized against it. And so China's really put an emphasis on becoming self-reliant. The plan that we've learned about, it is somewhere between 28 to 70 billion US dollars. On the lower end of that, that would be something like the US Chip Act that was introduced under the Biden administration. At the higher end of that, that would be more than any government has spent when it comes to subsidies and other financial support for the semiconductor industry. So you see there, Beijing is thinking very, very big in terms of what it can do to help that industry.
And a clear sign of what Beijing's priorities are. John, talk to us about what we know about this fund is going to work its way into the AI ecosystem.
So a lot of the details are still uncertain. We don't know exactly how much money. We have this range between 28 and 70. We do not know where exactly the money would come from. Would it come from the central government? How much of it would come from the local governments? What we do understand, though, is it would be spent as subsidies and as other sort of financial support for manufacturing. This would help reduce the cost for the end users if they were to buy chips from Huawei, other Chinese-produced chips. It would also, of course, make those NVIDIA H200s less attractive, potentially, when you look at cost and performance. And so this is, again, one way that the Chinese government has at its disposal to make the Chinese industry more competitive globally.
John, great to get insights from you. Thank you. Our senior executive editor, John Liu, in Beijing. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
16 people are now confirmed dead. That's after Sunday's terror attack at Bondi Beach in Sydney. Two gunmen, a father and son, opened fire on a crowd celebrating the first day of Hanukkah in a park next to the beach. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the shooting was a targeted attack on the Jewish community. Bloomberg's Paul Allen joins us now from Bondi Beach. And Paul, I mean, Australia is still really coming to terms with this huge terror attack. What exactly do we know, and what's the mood as well on the ground?
The mood very somber. There's a few dozen people down here, mostly just sitting around in total silence. The community really still in shock. You can still hear helicopters flying overhead at the moment. The actual crime scene itself was a little off in this direction, where Hanukkah was being celebrated. Among the dead, a 10-year-old girl and an 87-year-old rabbi as well, who was a father of 5. Also among the dead, one of the gunmen, 50-year-old Sajid Akram. He and his son were confirmed as the gunman. He was the registered, licensed, legal owner of 6 firearms. Investigations are continuing into how he came to acquire those, but he did legally own them. Also found at the scene 2 improvised explosives devices, which the police took away and disarmed. The other gunman was the 24-year-old Naveed Akram, the son of Sajid. He's in a critical condition in hospital at the moment. The pair told their mother that they were heading down the coast for a fishing expedition. Instead, they were holed up at an Airbnb elsewhere in Sydney. That property now also the subject of a police search. And among all the horror, there were also acts of heroism, not the least of which was Ahmed El Ahmed, a 43-year-old fruit shop owner who, in extraordinary video circulating on social media, tackled one of the gunmen from behind and disarmed him, almost certainly stopping further carnage. The police, meanwhile, heavy police presence down here, as you'd expect, calling for calm, saying now now is not the time for retribution.
That being said, Paul, we are also hearing from some other international leaders. Netanyahu is assigning blame to Australia. Have a listen.
It pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent and you must replace weakness with action.
Netanyahu citing anti-Semitism. What's been the reaction there in Australia to this?
Yes, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, was asked about Netanyahu's comments and also Netanyahu's warning. He said he told Anthony Albanese 4 months ago that calling for a Palestinian state poured fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. Anthony Albanese said now is not the time to talk about that. He said this is a moment for national unity. He was also asked, did you ignore the warnings from the community? Because the Jewish community has been expressing the concern about an upsurge in anti-Semitic rhetoric and attacks, saying they don't feel safe. Anthony Albanese said we will continue to stand with Jewish Australians and stamp out anti-Semitism in all of its forms. But that is perhaps a preview of what's to come in terms of domestic politics. That's almost certainly going to dominate the conversation heading into 2026. You can see the floral tributes behind me. Anthony Albanese laid a wreath there earlier today. In a few minutes' time, the opposition leader, Susan Lee, is going to be here to also lay a wreath and make some remarks to the media. Now, she's under pressure from some right-wing elements in her own party. The Liberal Party has been losing support to the right-wing anti-immigration One Nation Party as well. So an interesting political scene starting to bubble up in Australia. So it's going to be perhaps a challenging year for Anthony Albanese in 2026.
Paul, thank you so much. Paul Allen at Bondi Beach with the latest on this terror attack, which could have political implications for Australia as well. Now on to some other headlines we're following. We're also following developments from a mass shooting in the U.S. Police have detained a person of interest after the shooting at Brown University that left 2 dead and 9 injured. The school has sent students home and called off final exams, classes and assignments for the semester. The shooting happened in a classroom on what was the second day of final exams at the Rhode Island University, which is about 11,000 students. Thailand says there are no plans for a ceasefire with Cambodia. That's according to Prime Minister Anutin Chanvirakul, who posted on Facebook late on Sunday. It comes as Thailand reported its first civilian death from a Cambodian rocket attack after days of intense fighting. The dispute between the two neighbors has killed dozens of people since it erupted last week. President Trump suggests the U.S. will do big damage to militants behind a deadly attack on American forces in Syria. 2 soldiers and an interpreter were killed over the weekend during counter-terrorism operations. Trump has blamed the assault on the Islamic State terror group.
I can tell you in Syria, there will be a lot of damage done to the people that did it. They got the individual person, but there'll be big damage done.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has signaled Kyiv could accept security guarantees from the U.S. and Europe in place of its long-term goal of joining NATO. Zelensky met with a U.S. delegation led by Steve Witkoff in a 5-hour meeting in Berlin on Sunday. Ukraine has sought NATO membership for years to protect against future Russian aggression, but has altered its rhetoric as Washington presses for the war to end. Belle?
Yeah, Avril, we're just a couple of minutes into trading for European stocks futures, and we are seeing some fairly muted moves so far, looking like we might see a bit of upward gains at the start of the day. But at the same time, we did close lower on Friday, and concerns around AI bubble fears continuing to permeate across European stocks. According to our strategists, though, we should see them moving higher into 2026. More ahead. This is Bloomberg.
Chile's arch-conservative Jose Antonio Kast has defeated leftist rival Janet Jara of the Communist Party in a presidential runoff as the Latin American nation joins a global shift towards hard-right leaders. Let's get the latest with Bloomberg's Chile bureau reporter Carolina Gonzalez in Santiago. So, Carolina, talk to us about what we can expect from Kast in the early days, given what he's been pledging.
For sure. I mean, as you mentioned, Kast here defeated Communist Janet Jara by a huge margin. The next couple of days, we'll be looking for any appointments he has for any cabinet members, as well as any additional measures or pledges he made in regards to his key areas like security, migration, and the economy. He has already made a couple pledges surrounding all those three areas. Specifically, he wants to turn any irregular immigration into a crime. He wants to spur growth back to 4%. We're currently around at 2.5%. He wants to cut fiscal spending by $6 billion in the next 18 months, along with other economic measures, including deregulation and investments. The next couple of days, we will definitely be looking for any further announcements as well of how he will try to collaborate with other parties as well as previous candidates and how he's going to incorporate any of their pledges as well as their teams.
So far, it seems like investors are cheering this voting result, but what is going to be the longer-term implication for the markets, do you think?
Longer term, the market will definitely be looking at how Congress actually negotiates with Kast and whether he's able to pass through legislation any of these changes. All of these changes have to be passed through Congress. There is no other way for the president to take these measures. And so the market will be looking at that, but also as well as cabinet members that I mentioned before. Some of the key appointments will be the finance minister, as well as the interior and security minister, given that crime has been on the rise. And a lot of the citizens have attributed that rise in crime to the rise in immigration. So we should expect markets tomorrow to take this outcome as positive. We might see the peso rallying a little bit further and for the stock market to push a little bit higher up. But any massive or magnificent any gains that would be bigger than 3-4%
Carolina,
would be closer to March.
Unfortunately, we're running up against the hard break. Thank you so much for bringing us the latest out of Chile. Our Bloomberg Chile bureau reporter Carolina Gonzalez in Santiago. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
We're heading into the last full week of trading for 2025, and really that primary theme we're continuing to track is what we see in the tech space, because that is what is dragging down the Asian benchmark so far. You can see it's really hitting that tech-heavy index so far, the Kospi in particular. We're watching Taiwan, of course, when it comes online in about 30 minutes from now. The Nikkei 225, likewise, at 1% to the downside this morning. We did have that Tenkan survey coming out earlier, in line with expectations, the large manufacturing reading at 15, but also setting the stage for the BOJ to hike rates, Avril, later this week.
Yeah, Belle. In the meantime, we're also tracking the Chinese property sector. Developer Vanke says it will communicate and negotiate with all parties, and this is after the firm failed to obtain enough support for its plan to delay paying a yuan note that's due on Monday. The developer now must find money to pay the $283 million note by the end of today, or within a 5-business-day grace period, or come to a separate agreement to push back the deadline. Vanke is now planning a second bondholder meeting on December 18th. Let's bring in Charlene Shu, Senior China Macro Financial Analyst at Autonomous Research. Charlene, great to see you. I wonder if we could just get your reaction first on how Vanke has failed to garner enough support. Does this come as a surprise for you? And how much does this drag things out even further?
Yeah, I think it is a surprise for the market because for several quarters now they've been getting support from Shenzhen Metro Group, the largest single shareholder and part of the government. And so there's just been an assumption that that support would be there indefinitely, but things appear to have changed on that front over the last month or so. And I think we are now in a situation where there is a real risk of default this week if Vanke can't find other options that can get bondholders on board with.
What does this also tell us about the position that Vanke was thought to have had among analysts, among market participants, in that maybe this was the one developer that was a bit different in terms of distress and the fallout compared to the likes of Country Garden and Evergrande?
I mean, really, the reason Vanke was in that position was because of the quasi-state ownership and the view that the government would draw a line. It would allow privately owned developers to default, but would not allow state-owned entities to default because of the questions that would raise about the implicit government guarantee, not only for property developers, but a whole host of companies. So that had been the thinking really going into about a month ago. But now that there seems to be a shift in the willingness of the local government to provide support for Vanke, that is why I think there is a real risk of default here. And, you know, this could be coming not at a great time, given all of the other pressures that China's economy is facing right now, particularly on the investment side. The real concern, immediate concern, if we do get a default this week and they're not able to get something passed before the 5-day grace period, is what is the fixed income, domestic fixed income market reaction to this default? Do investors simply look at this and say, hey, you know, we've seen dozens of developers default over the last several years. This is the last big week one. We've dealt with this before. It's not a big deal, in which case there isn't a lot of volatility, or does the market get quite nervous and say, you know what, even though there's not a lot of other state-owned developers who might default, there's a lot of other state-owned companies that have implicit guarantees from local governments. And if this is now signaling that that guarantee is not 100%, does the market feel like it needs to reprice a lot of state-owned company bonds? So that's the real question, I think, for the domestic fixed income market in China.
Yeah, Charlene, you're talking about two different scenarios. There's one where it looks relatively contained in the risk of a default, the other where you see some possibly quite significant spillover risk. So which scenario do you think is most likely?
So people I've spoken to in the market tend to lean toward things will be calm. There's just a view that, look, we've been through this for so many developers at this point, including bigger entities than Vanke. Having another Chinese developer default and start to go through the restructuring process isn't the end of the world. And I do think that the government, you know, could potentially be telling state banks and other entities, if we really get into a different negative reaction, they could tell them, look, you need to be ready to step in and buy domestic bonds if we really get into a sell-off here. Although my hope is that that isn't what happens, and we still, you know, remain quite contained, and that investors view this as a property problem and not a generalized issue with government support for state-owned companies.
We've got a slew of China eco data coming up later this morning, and one of the key metrics to watch will be that fixed asset investment number. What are you expecting there? And as well, how does that sort of portend for broader weakness in the Chinese economy going into next year?
So we're in the middle of a serious recession in capital expenditure in China. Fixed asset investment declined 11.8% in October. It's been negative since July. This is a really significant thing that is happening right now. Every single subcomponent of FAI is contracting. We do think that the $1 trillion stimulus for infrastructure that was announced in early October is probably going to provide some support for that subcomponent here in the November data. But I think we're still going to have very deep declines in property investment as well as manufacturing investment. And if you look at what the authorities just said last week in the Central Economic Work Conference, they were signaling more support for infrastructure spending next year, which again should maybe help that particular line, which was down 13% in October. Potentially, maybe we can get back to par level or even slightly positive next year. The problem is that is not going to be enough to offset the drag from property and manufacturing investment. So I still think we're going to remain in an overall CapEx decline going into next year, at least for the first half, if not the full year.
This is an economy, a country that has been reliant on investment for a long, long time. As you watch these shifts, what is that going to mean, particularly for spillover to the rest of the world?
The two main channels of spillover are, one, if we're really looking at persistent contraction in fixed asset investment in China, then in theory, China should not need to be importing the raw materials that it has been. So we could start to see some import weakness there, particularly in raw materials and commodities. The second area of transmission is through deflation, exporting deflation. We were in a situation where export prices of Chinese goods were actually making their way into positive territory, and they did increase year on year, 1 month during the summer. But since this CapEx recession has taken hold, those export prices have deteriorated again and are now showing bigger and bigger declines. So I think that manifests as exporting deflation to the rest of the world, which we've had off and on for many years with China. But certainly, I think it does help the Fed, for example, in the dilemma that it is facing right now in terms of which side of the mandate to emphasize, inflation or employment.
Do you see any path out of the deflationary mindset then next year?
I mean, arguably, I think the authorities recognize that they need to bring better balance between supply of goods and demand for those goods. And if it's already out of balance and you keep growing investment, you're just going to grow that supply even more. So allowing this investment contraction to happen is actually, in the long term, the way all of this gets into better balance and the way to address deflation. The problem is the imbalances in China are so large that they cannot be addressed through this mechanism in just a couple of quarters. I mean, this is going to have to go on at least for a year, in our view, before we start to bring some important sectors back into balance.
Charlene, great to have you with us this morning as we await this all-important second bondholder meeting from China Vanke later this week. That was Charlene Chu there, Senior China Macro-Financial Analyst at Autonomous Research. And shifting now to some other top corporate stories that we're tracking today. Well, Bloomberg has learned that Oracle is pushing back the completion dates for some of its data centers it's developing for OpenAI to 2028. That's from 2027. Sources say the delays are largely due to labour and material shortages. Oracle's been working to deliver on a $300 billion contract to supply the computing power necessary to train and run OpenAI's models since it was inked earlier this year. Intel is said to be in advanced talks to acquire AI chip startup SambaNova Systems for about $1.6 billion. That's including debt. Bloomberg's learned that a deal for the California-based company could come together as soon as next month. The acquisition would give Intel a long-sought platform to help build out its AI product offering, with SambaNova having been valued at $5 billion in 2021. We'll have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Well, the former Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai faces a verdict later Monday in a landmark national security trial, a decision that's going to define the limits of free speech in the city. Our China correspondent Min Min Lo is outside the court for us as we await this decisional ruling that's going to be handed down in about an hour and a half from now. So, Min Min, just explain the significance of this case and as well how it's going to be a test of the judicial independence.
Yeah, it's a very significant case. As you can see behind me, there is a lot of media here, domestic and international media attention. There are a lot of police just maintaining security in the area. We saw a stream of members of the public enter the courthouse already. And it's being closely watched because Jimmy Lai is one of the first and one of the highest profile cases that has been charged under the national security law, which was imposed back in June of 2020. He's charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and 1 count of publishing seditious material. And it's closely watched because this national security trial is being presided by 3 judges handpicked by Chief Executive John Lee. It's a trial without a jury, and Jimmy Lai himself was not allowed to hire a foreign lawyer of his choice after Beijing intervened and gave John Lee, the Chief Executive, the power to bar any foreign lawyers. So it's seen as a test of judicial independence, especially after a series of departure of senior judges from the highest court in Hong Kong post the imposition of the national security law as well.
So a test for judicial independence, that's the broader context, as you say. But talk to us more about the details of this trial.
Yes, so Jimmy Lai is a well-known name in Hong Kong. He is the founder of the now-defunct newspaper Apple Daily, which is known for its strong pro-democracy stance, often urging its readers to take to the streets. It's known for its tabloid-style coverage of politics and celebrities. And that newspaper was raided a couple of times by officials who then seized its computers, essentially forcing it to shut down eventually by freezing its millions of dollars worth of assets. And Jimmy Lai himself has already been handed a few jail sentences for participating in unauthorized assembly. And Chinese Foreign Ministry is calling him the principal mastermind and perpetrator of the 2019 protests. And he's also being accused of calling for sanctions to be imposed on Hong Kong and China. His foreign contacts also under scrutiny because he met with then U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the height of the 2019 protests as well. And his online broadcasts, his articles are being used by prosecutors as evidence of his intent to collude with foreign forces.
On that topic of foreign or Western governments, just talk to us about that international attention on this case as well. You mentioned the foreign media that are there, but give us more context.
Yeah, there has been a lot of attention by international observers, by foreign countries, especially the US and the UK. US President Donald Trump said he raised this issue with President Xi when the 2 men met in South Korea in October. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as well said that this will be a priority of his administration to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. One area that has been highlighted by international observers is Jimmy Lai's health. His family has said that he suffers from heart palpitations. His health has been deteriorating, and so rights groups have been calling for his release on medical grounds. But meanwhile, Beijing has been saying that other countries should not be interfering in China's domestic affairs, and also saying that the national security trial is fair and has equal treatment for everybody.
Min Min, what about what you're seeing on the ground in Hong Kong in terms of public sentiment? Given how we're not long after this really devastating fire in the city, alleged co-election that saw low voter turnout, and then more recently the dissolution of the Hong Kong Democratic Party.
Yes, there's definitely a sense of caution from members of the public. I tried to speak to some of the supporters who were gathered here, queuing outside the courthouse since yesterday. Not many of them were very willing to speak to the media, and understandably so, given the imposition of the national security law. We have already seen the prosecution of many pro-democracy activists. Dozens of civil society groups have been forced to shut down. And as you said, over the weekend, we had news of the Hong Kong Democratic Party, a leading opposition party for many years, voting to dissolve themselves. That was announced on Sunday by the former chairwoman Emily Lau on Facebook, and it represents the end of a party that has been in operation since 1994, a party that was pushing Beijing aggressively for democratic reforms, calling for universal suffrage, for example. And of course, the city is also just reeling from the trauma of that fire, right? One of the most deadly fires in decades that killed 160 people. And the National Security Office of Hong Kong at the time also warned any individuals against using this fire as a pretext to incite chaos in Hong Kong. And many people are, taking that as a sign of caution, of warning. And of course, we also just concluded the Legislative Councillor election last week, which saw the second lowest turnout in history as well.
That was our China correspondent, Min Min Lo, there, as we await that ruling to be handed down in just over an hour's time from now. But circling back to another one of our top stories this morning, because we're taking you to live pictures of Bondi Beach here in Sydney, and you are seeing people coming to lay wreaths and flowers in tribute or memorial to the 16 people that have been confirmed dead after the terror attack yesterday afternoon. So 2 gunmen, we know, a father and son, opened fire on a crowd celebrating the first day of Hanukkah in a park next to the beach. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called the shooting a targeted attack on the Jewish community. And as we said, the deadliest terrorist attack in Australia's history. It's the most fatal shooting as well that we've seen going back to the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania in 1996. That was a tragedy that certainly prompted lawmakers to implement sweeping gun control measures as well just weeks afterward. And it is becoming already evident that gun control is just one of the conversations going to be going well into 2026, but also the relationship that Australia has with Israel and whether the Albanese government was doing enough to curb the tide of anti-Semitism that was seen in the country over the past several months. We will have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Chinese EV makers are bringing their aggressive discounting to Thailand as they struggle with bruising competition at home. Our Asia transport reporter Danny Lee joins us now. So Danny, talk to us about why these Chinese names are bringing these discounts to Thailand. Why the sharp price cuts?
Yeah, there's a familiar feeling of price cuts in the EV sector happening, specifically this time in Thailand, where BYD, one of China's biggest automakers, has cut price of its electric sedan by 38%. We also have SAIC's MG reducing the price of its hatchback by 27%. And these are some of the eye-catching discounts. Now, the reason why it's happening in Thailand, this is because there is a rush, particularly by foreign automakers and specifically Chinese automakers, trying to meet local quotas around sales. This really relates back to their market entry in Thailand over the last couple of years, where there is prospects for huge growth, and that came with huge subsidies from the Thai government for them to build local production and permitting them to export into the country as a way of starting their sales. And so there is a huge rush by local automakers trying to backfill some of the quotas that they need to ensure that they meet the numbers at the end of the year and beyond. And so there is that pressure. And what we have seen is that the number of sales has gone up by 20% over October and November. So this is really hurting the likes of the Japanese automakers. But it does remain to be seen how long this discounting and these sales helps in a market like Thailand.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch the response from names like Toyota, for instance, given that they've had such a stranglehold on the Southeast Asian market. But let's talk about also the moves that China's making domestically, because we've just got more efforts to try and rein in cutthroat competition at home. But just tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a huge contrast what's happening in Thailand to what's happening in China, where new draft guidelines have been introduced late on Friday from China's State Administration for Market Regulation. They want to crack down on the price setting to make sure that no automaker can sell their EVs at lower than production cost. And there is this warning that they've given in its draft guidelines of significant legal risks that automakers bear if they do this. But it's just one of the latest examples that China is doing to crack down on the EV sector, where there is such oversupply and deflationary pressure. So, yeah, this is one of the things that China is doing to try and continue its push to try and scale back this level of cutthroat competition.
Danny, that was Danny Lee there, our Asia transport reporter in Hong Kong. And let's also take a look at the setup for Hong Kong mainland markets, because we are going to be opening in about 30 minutes from now. And you can see here we're actually looking for losses across the board. Particularly notable there, actually, to note what's going to be the open for Taiwan, because you're seeing TAIEX futures already down 1.7%. Likewise, another tech-heavy benchmark. The Kospi is leading the losses so far in early trading. China to note as well, because you've got the story around the chip sector. This is a Bloomberg scoop, but we do have reporting that China is planning to have as much as $70 billion of support directed to the local semiconductor industry. So chip stocks very much a major focus for us. But more ahead, this is Bloomberg.